For the first time in a long time, we have got a very full 13-game main slate for NFL DFS coming up on Sunday, and as a result, there are a lot of pretty fun plays. It's hard to decide how to prioritize those fun options, where to allocate our ever-so-precious salary dollars, and fill out good lineups over on FanDuel. We're going to try to dissect this slate and tell you how to do exactly that for today, at least as best as we can. So let's dive on in and get you ready for Week 17. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and FanDuel Research. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a managing editor of digital media for FanDuel Research, joined here as I am every Thursday by Brandon Gdula. He is a senior managing editor for FanDuel Research. Brandon, happy holidays to you. Happy New Year's in advance. How you doing today?
Happy holidays to you. Happy New Year as well. I'm not onto like the New Year's stuff yet, so I wasn't prepped to.
I mean, it's in 3 days, so you should.
But it is our last chance, so what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna talk to you again until 2024, so might as well get you ready. Can
we make it 2025?
Rude.
I'm good. Yeah, this slate's been giving me some fits a little bit the past day, but other than that, can't complain.
Yeah, it fits because it's hard to decide which of the high salaried options we most want to prioritize. Like Christian McCaffrey rules, and he's in a very good spot against Washington. In general, that game is pretty fun. That offense is pretty fun, but $11,000 on FanDuel is his salary, and we live in a salary cap world. Wish we did not, but hey, that is the world in which we find ourselves. So we have to decide, how hard do we go at McCaffrey versus allocating salary elsewhere? Do we strive more for balance and take advantage of a lot of good plays in the 7,000 range, both at running back and receiver, good 6,000 range tight ends as well? A lot to dissect, which we'll do right here throughout the show for today. But first, a reminder to make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. You can get NBA DFS advice via Tom Vecchio every weekday on the Daily ISO. He is breaking down NBA DFS there and over on the FanDuel TV Plus app. So you can get to FanDuel TV Plus by going to FanDuel.com/watch and logging in with your FanDuel account, or go to the FanDuel TV Plus app on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku devices. No daily ISO tomorrow because it's a company holiday, and no daily ISO on Monday. Tom is back with you once again Tuesday, and there's a show up for Thursday as well. You can find the Heat Check running throughout the playoffs for the NFL on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, the FanDuel YouTube page, and FanDuel TV Plus. As always, there's a free play over on FanDuel Research. If you want to play NFL DFS with no entry fee, go to FanDuel.com/research and click the article that has a link to the free play in there. FanDuel.com/research. On the homepage, there is an article there. Click into there to find the link for this week's free play. Score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, totals, and more. So visit FanDuel and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame moneyline wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777. Or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700. Visit ksgamblinghealth.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghealth.org in Maryland, 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-HOPE-Y or text Open Y in New York. Let's dig in now to our slate breakdown here for week number 17. And Brandon, to me, it comes down to prioritizations, because we got to identify which of these very fun, high salary plays we want to focus on for this week. That includes Christian McCaffrey, it includes Kyron Williams, it includes a lot of pretty solid wide receivers as well. So that to me is the key thing, is sorting through those studs and identifying which ones I feel best about, considering salary, game environment, matchup, etc. So that's the big thing for me. What stands out to you when you dive in to this week 17 main slate?
I don't even. I know, like, we're on the same page, and this is gonna be one of those situations where we're on the same page, and it sounds like we disagree, and then people give us comments that sounds like we hate each other. Which, I mean,
Merry
maybe we do,
Christmas.
but uh, I don't think it's about figuring out which studs we like the most, and it's figuring out how we can get to the studs with while feeling good. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we like Kyron a lot
Mm-hmm.
as a consolation, which is a word I
Yeah,
remembered this week,
good for
from
you.
Christian
Proud of you.
McCaffrey. But we love Christian McCaffrey and would want to play him. I don't think, like, we're not really splitting hairs over which one are we going to get to. It's to get to either of them or Tyreek Hill at 9,800. You have to you have to compromise throughout your
Mm-hmm.
lineup. And I've been building lineups more and more yesterday than I typically do entering a show, just because I wanted to see how feasible it really is, even to play just Christian McCaffrey
Right.
with, spoiler alert, Lamar Jackson, who
Yeah.
is either the QB1 or QB2 once you factor in salary. For us, he's going to be the guy that I want to try to prioritize. But you do that, you plug in a defense, things get kind of sticky
Yeah.
quickly. And so you're either relying on multiple value running backs, which we may get, or like multiple receivers in the 5,000 range just to get to Christian McCaffrey. And that's the sort of the question, is there enough value to play McCaffrey a lot?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sold just yet. And I think we're in agreement with our main build being McCaffrey-less,
Yeah.
which is scary,
Oh, yeah.
but you can get back up into that 7,000 range at running back and receiver if you're not jamming in McCaffrey. And, it's a 13-game slate. There's a lot of guys who could have big games, and it's not just McCaffrey. I mean, McCaffrey can definitely have the biggest game of any of them, but
Correct.
again, we're coming at it from the same place, but, you know, I might be more likely to play Kyron Williams or Tyreek Hill, even though there's not going to be anybody I like more than Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, if we're looking as far as like salaries go on those guys, McCaffrey's salary is $11,000. You got Tyreek Hill checking in at $9,800, and then Kyron Williams 94. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. Is all three of those guys are in really good spots. Tyreek Hill in a good game to stack against Baltimore, Kyron facing the Giants, and then McCaffrey facing the Commanders. Those are great spots to be in. And that's why we're even having this discussion about whether or not they're worth it, is because all three are in awesome spots. But like you said, I was trying to build Lamar with McCaffrey lineups yesterday, and it's tough. It does require you to use, like you said, two value backs or potentially as many as three low salaried receivers at like $6,500 and lower, which is, it's doable, but like it's a leap of faith for sure.
It is. And we're kind of building those lineups with the assumption that Isaiah Pacheco would miss and we can play
Correct.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And if we don't
Correct.
get that, it gets even tougher to get to
Correct.
McCaffrey.
Right. And there may be some other guys who pop up as far as value goes, because the injury list this week is very long,
Yeah.
but it is still very tough for sure. So that'll be our task for today, is to identify which of those value plays are we okay with, and how does that impact the rest of our lineups. Let's begin things and try to begin this massive injury section by talking about the Jags. Trevor Lawrence didn't practice Wednesday due to his shoulder injury. Lawrence is pushing to play. That's far from a guarantee, though, and it's not like a must-win game for the Jags, but it's pretty dang close. Zay Jones got in limited practice, seems to be on track to return from a one-game absence. They're facing the Panthers this week. Any interest for you in the Jags if Lawrence is able to go?
So, yeah, their playoff odds would change pretty drastically with a loss, and they'd
Mm-hmm.
climb up pretty high with a win. So, like you said, it's not a must-win, but it is a
Mm-hmm.
very important one.
Mm-hmm.
Next Gen Stats has their odds of if they win, it's about 82%, and if they lose, it goes down to 40%. So They want this one. I haven't been on Lawrence much at all this year. Obviously hasn't burned me very often. His efficiency's been just okay when you adjust for opponents faced. You made this comment. I had the same thought. Travis Etienne's salary is really, really high. I don't have
Yeah.
interest there. Evan Ingram is someone I've been monitoring a lot. His salary is high. It's 7,000. Again, it's nothing against him. It's the salary.
Yeah.
And then with Calvin Ridley, like maybe I just prefer other receivers.
Yeah.
And like this, he's set his salary 7,100. So I think I'm kind of largely out, but that starts to feel too dismissive for a team playing in a really impactful game. Am I?
I don't think
I
it's too
mean,
dismissive if you look at it through the context 2023, because
yeah,
like every team is still lively. So we're not like using duds when we go elsewhere. And like it's a low
yeah.
total game. Panthers defense outside of last week has played pretty well recently. So I'm okay being a good amount lower on the Jags in the spot. Even if Lawrence plays, honestly, they might get Cam Robinson back at left tackle. He returned to practice, I believe, on Wednesday, which would be a boost for them for sure. But I'm okay being lower on them for right now. CJ Stroud returned to a limited practice on Wednesday. He's missed the past 2 games, but is expected to be cleared for this week. We'll talk about the Texans with Stroud in the trend section. Will Levis got into full practice Wednesday, meaning he should be able to return after a 1-game absence. He had a high ankle sprain, which forced him to sit out in week 16. So we get the DGAF King himself facing a secondary that just let up 16,000 yards in a single game to Amari Cooper. How does Levis returning impact your view of DeAndre Hopkins against a very poor Texans secondary?
It improves my view on Hopkins. Both quarterbacks for Tennessee have been subpar, but like not specifically awful with their efficiency. It's not. I'm not going to say it's good, but it's also not completely dreadful. The biggest change is the ADOT, as you like to point out. Will Levis over a 10-yard ADOT. Tannehill still pretty solid at 8.3 or 8.6. But you're going to get more downfield heaves to DeAndre Hopkins, which I'm okay with. You want a semblance of safety with like some catchable targets, but what really sells me on Hopkins this week is that the salary starts with a 6.
Yeah.
It could easily be in the 7,000 range, and then I start to get a little more worried. But spoiler alert, this is a range upper 6s that you're going to be in a lot, especially if you're trying to build into your lineups. McCaffrey or Kyron or Tyreek. I think I'm going to have Hopkins. He's also kind of like I like this game if CJ Stroud plays. Please, I mean, do what you need CJ to
I think
rest
he's
up
okay to go.
properly.
I
But
yeah,
it's just
he's good to go.
yeah. I feel like a lot of concussions are like have been 1 week.
Yeah, he's
This
had
one,
3 this year, though, I think, only one of which
yeah,
was, well, if you look at like some conspiracy theories, I'm pretty sure he's had 3 this year. I think that's why it was not ideal.
yeah. I'm just saying, rest up, don't rush back or anything.
Correct.
But
Yes.
if you're good,
Yeah.
I would love that. But yeah, Hopkins, he's kind of in consideration for me for like my main lineup. Is I guess how I could probably just sum it up.
I think he's in play for cash at
Yeah,
67. Like in play for cash, main tournament lineup. That salary is very low. He gets the DGAF King back, a lot of deep balls. It's a revenge game. Like, let us not overlook that. I know it's nobody left who was there when he was there, but like, I don't know how many more boxes you can check. So, and I can get to Hopkins in a McCaffrey plus Lamar lineup. So I think that's pretty attractive for this week for sure. Isaiah Pacheco didn't practice Wednesday after suffering a concussion on Monday. Still has time to clear, but that does ding his odds of going. Missing practice Wednesday. You'll talk about the Chiefs and how to handle their backs in the trend section. Jamar Chase did not practice Wednesday due to his shoulder injury. He apparently took part in the walkthrough, which implies there's at least a shot that he's able to go, but official tag for him was DNP in practice. Chiefs corner L'Jarius Sneed didn't practice due to a calf injury, which would boost the Bengals passing offense. How are you viewing the Bengals in this spot against the Chiefs with and without Chase?
I was kind of taking some notes on this. I don't really know what the public perception on Jake Browning really is.
I don't either.
But
Great
like
question.
he's been good once you adjust for opponents faced.
Yeah, yes.
And it's a smaller sample, but He's basically been between Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff in EPA per dropback over expectation. You know, that's pretty nice.
I feel like those two guys are magnets for each other in every aspect of life.
Yeah, just inseparable. But I feel good passing on Mixon.
Yeah.
He's just giving up a lot of high leverage passing work to Chase Brown. T. Higgins didn't really, as you pull him up next, didn't really dominate with targets last week. He had one huge play.
Yeah.
That led to almost all of his production. I mean, he made some good plays. He got some targets. I'm not saying it was just one play, but that has really boosted his salary to 7,800. There's no discount on Jamar Chase's salary at 8,300. If you look at this, like there's been 3 games basically with Browning, Chase, and Higgins. Nobody's above a 20% target share. I guess the best I could, if there's no Chase and we really need something, there's like Tyler Boyd at 59.
No.
What about Andre Iosivas?
Yes, Andre
49.
Iosivas. Yes. I would happily do that.
5 downfield targets for him last week, 8 total.
Yeah, and like honestly, I think he's pretty fun. Like if you look at like his like athletic profile, like he's actually, kind of cool. And we're talking a lot about how we need to find ways to get to McCaffrey this week. Like $4,900 for an athletic wide receiver who's getting volume and has a cool name. Like you could do a lot worse than that. So Iosivas, $4,900. If there's no Jamar Chase, I will go there, not for a cash game format, because I'm not going to get to McCaffrey there, and I just accept that already. But for tournament lineups where I want to get to McCaffrey plus Lamar, Iosivas might be the first place I turn, honestly.
It is appealing. There's definitely risk, but there's also that upside. And it's, again, this is not just one of those, well, if Chase is out, maybe Iosivas gets like some extra run. Again, we've seen it a little bit.
Played a lot of snaps.
Browning's been playing fairly well. Yeah. Like you could do much worse.
And even if L'Jarius Sneed plays, his focus would be on T. Higgins, not Andre Iosivas. So yeah. I think that regardless, Iosivas should be in play. So Jamar Chase, rest up. We'll see you in week 18, hopefully, because it would be nice to have that salary saver with Iosivas at $4,900. I think Chase will play, so I wouldn't like get your hopes set on Iosivas, but like keep him in mind if Chase can't go. Jalen Waddle didn't practice Wednesday due to a high ankle sprain. Mike McDaniel did not rule him out, but it does seem like Waddle is a long shot. Raheem Mostert missed most of the second half last week with a knee or ankle injury. He didn't practice Wednesday either. We'll talk about them in the bookmaker section. Zay Flowers didn't practice Wednesday because of a calf issue. He also missed some practice last week, but that was because of a foot. So I don't know if this is a new injury or if they're tied together. We'll talk about the Ravens, though, in the bookmakers section. Josh Jacobs did not practice Wednesday due to a quad issue. That's held him out the past 2 games. Now, Jacobs did get in a limited practice last week in their second practice, but then was a DNP on the final practice. So I think it's still a shot play, but I can't get a read on his practice like cadence, honestly. If Jacobs cannot go, how do you view Zamir White against the Colts?
I think I'd be in on him a little bit out of necessity, but also liked what I saw. Really good role last week, 81% of the snaps, 22 carries, just 1 target, but 11 routes, which was almost half of their routes, just because of it was a 48% route rate. So I don't think that the 1 target indicates that he doesn't have a passing game role. I think it was just game script related. Tons of scrimmage yards for him in that matchup as well with the 145. Again, all rushing just because the targets weren't there, but $6,100 salary. You never know if we're going to get Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I would probably feel okay playing White in a main lineup cash game situation, because if you can get an 80% snap rate, someone who should have a path to rushing and receiving work, it's hard to pass up on a slate where there's not a whole lot of that.
Yeah. I think that the only pitfall of White is if they do fall behind, I know that his route rate was good, but like that wasn't a positive script. If they fall behind, I'd worry that Amir Abdullah would be the guy there because they actually can still make the playoffs somehow. Like they have non-zero playoff odds if they were to win this week. So they're going to push.
Yeah,
So I think
they're a
that,
losing out team.
yeah. So must win.
Yeah.
I think they can keep this game close enough against Colts, but like I could also see it going haywire because it's it's Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell back in Indiana narrative. He played college at Purdue, so maybe a little bit of that, keep them in a more neutral game script. That would probably keep him out of a cash game lineup for me. The risk of falling behind and not being on the field, but I think there's enough there to go in tournaments. He would not be like a 60%, amazing value play, but like, I could go 35, 40% somewhere in there. Kind of like, what are the odds that the Raiders are in a super positive script again? I mean, not super positive, but like positive enough. I think that's kind of the guiding light I would use with Zamir White. Michael Pittman was able to log a limited practice Wednesday with his concussion. He had cleared last week, but then had symptoms flare up and then was ruled out. Getting into practice Wednesday seemingly puts him on track to return. Zach Moss also got limited practice with his forearm issue. How are you viewing the Colts here in their matchup with the Raiders?
So if you look at the splits entering week 15, and I don't know, maybe with week 15 it would have checked out too because he was getting peppered, but over a 30% target share for Pittman, 37% of the red zone targets, but under 15% of the total team red zone plays just because they run the ball a decent amount in the red zone. The salary, though, 7,700, doesn't leave you a whole lot of room for error, really. I think he has one of the better roles as a receiver in football, finally, because he did not have that in years past. But I don't think that I can justify him over some other higher salaried receivers from a default standpoint. And he's probably the only Colt that I would have interest in.
Yeah, I think that JT is not like totally off the map, but his role hasn't really gotten to be as good as you would really want it to be.
Yeah.
Jonathan Taylor, $8,400. That's high, higher than you want it to be. So he's not a cross off, but like probably I'm not going to get there. I can say that pretty definitively with him. And with Pittman, it is really about opportunity cost because like Puka Nacua is $200 or above him at 79, and like I would sell my
Is he
soul
your
to get
favorite player in football?
No, I just think he's always a bit undersalaried.
Okay.
Do you like him less than I do? This makes me question things.
It just seems like you always like him more than I do, and I think his salary is like fair.
Oh, rude. Okay, you can be wrong. That's fine. Hater. But then also below Pittman, you've got DJ Moore at 75, Brandon Ayuk 75, Chris Olave 74, Nico Collins 73. I did not skip Rashee Rice on.
Did you?
Rice is.
I mean,
I was going to say
them.
that like there are guys who can like torch me for not using them. I'm questioning that a bit with Rice as far as the ceiling because like Olave, Collins get deep targets and Rice doesn't as much. I think he's in play, but like downfield work, like they can kill you. And Pittman, I don't know if the ceiling in that sense is necessarily there right now.
Yeah, they're a tough team to read. This is a big game for them in terms of their playoff hopes. Again, just a big swing, whether they win or lose. So you would think that if he's good to go, he's going to see as much work as he can handle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many targets did he have before he left that?
5 in like a quarter.
Yeah, it was yeah.
I think he was tied for the team lead in targets despite leaving in like
I think he
early
was
second
too.
quarter.
Yeah. So he's just one of those guys. 11, 16, 13, 12 his past his games entering that one. Yeah. So he's got more of that volume based upside of like 10 catches, 140 yards and like a touchdown.
Yeah.
I like him. I just don't think I like him as much as other receivers like you pointed out.
I agree. Cole Kmet missed practice with a knee injury for the Bears on Wednesday. He got hit low on a long catch Sunday, did not return. DJ Moore was not listed on the injury report, which is a delight to see. So he's good to go. How would you view Moore against the Falcons in the event that Kmet cannot go for the Bears?
Yeah, he got rolled up and then came back. I thought he was going to, because I played him against you in our head-to-head, which, again, didn't go well for me. But the fact that he didn't have a huge game and hasn't had a huge game in 2 straight weeks has lowered his salary to a point where, this is something I talk about, not as much as I could or should, but I also just don't want to, hammer this and be results chasey. But you want to look at like a T. Higgins, his salary is up to 7,800 after a huge game.
Yeah.
With really one play, but again, that's not fair to T exactly. But DJ Moore hasn't had it. His salary's coming down. This is when you want to buy back in on players and just sort of be more receptive to these ebbs and flows. We know that DJ Moore, if he's healthy, which if he's not on the injury report, great. I think Moore needs to get more attention from me as like someone that I view as a true priority, and he's just another reason. If you can build around like DJ Moore and just take your pick between these other 7,000 range receivers. Same thing at running back.
Yeah.
There are enough of these guys where it at least gives you some. I say this on Thursday. It makes me feel okay not playing Christian McCaffrey as like my default.
Right. That's where we're at right now. That, could change. But a big part of the reason why I agree with you is because these guys in the mid-range are really rock solid for this week. The Patriots placed Ramondre Stevenson on injured reserve, ending his season, which means Zeke Elliott will remain the lead back as they face the Bills this week. What's your view of Zeke at $6,400?
Definitely past just plugging him in and assuming the best. He's played 91, 86, and 82% of the snaps the past 3 games. He's got 15 carries and 8 targets per game. So it's a 28% target share, which is absolutely wild to think about for Ezekiel Elliott.
Oh, no.
What?
I just realized his comp, and that makes me so sad. He's Rashad White in a worse offense. That's what his usage is right now. Like, not efficient running, but getting tons of passing game work. And like part of the reason we like Rashad White is because his offense is efficient enough. But like, because I was pretty low on Zeke and then kind of looked at the passing game use and it's like, oh man, I should probably be higher on him.
I was
Which
a little
bums me
because
out.
I talked about Zeke with you before the show, and it seemed like maybe I was higher on him than you were. But like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I would play like Zeke, CEH, and Zamir White if like everything works out that way, where everything's cleared up. But at a certain point, the reason that we never or historically don't play these value backs is they don't have great roles.
Yeah.
The main issue for Elliott right now isn't the role.
Yeah.
He's still playing above 80% of the snaps each week. He's getting a ton of targets. And yeah, he hurdled someone to score. That stuff sticks with people. But the fact that he can do that still is telling. So I think I'm higher on Zeke than you. I don't know if he's someone I'm sort of plugging in as a no-brainer, but I am pretty high on Zeke, I guess, compared to you.
I'm becoming higher on him the more I think about it, which is upsetting. So 6,000 range or running backs who could be in play include Zamir White, Gus Edwards, Zeke Elliott, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, dependent on the status of Pacheco, and then Devin Singletary at $6,600. Maybe Chuba Hubbard, 68. I think he had a hamstring. He's limited on Wednesday, the hamstring injury, which is new. But so keep tabs on him. But that's not terrible. I just don't want to use. I think the main downside of these guys is ceiling. Like the odds that they get me 25 aren't super high. And so like, do I want to occupy 2 spots in one lineup where I'm saying their best case scenario is like 18 FanDuel points? Like 18 is not going to kill you, but it's also not going to catapult you towards the top at this salary.
These aren't the mistake erasers.
Correct.
They help you get to the mistake erasers.
Correct.
With that in mind, if we have CEH, Zeke, Zamir. You mentioned Gus. Maybe we can talk about him more in the bookmaker section,
Mhm.
but it goes back to McCaffrey and 2 true value backs, or like a James Cook, Rashad White, someone
Right.
else, kind of 3 running back rotation.
Right.
There's really no right answer.
Yeah.
It depends
It's
on
tough.
the context you're entering and everything.
Yeah. But I'm higher on Zeke now than I was entering the show, just based on the passing game usage stuff. And like, I think I still want to get some Bills in there. So like, maybe as a bring back option, he grades out pretty well. Jacoby Brissett will start for the Commanders in place of Sam Howell this week. Brian Robinson got back to a limited practice on Wednesday with his hamstring injury. Chris Rodriguez did not practice. We'll talk about the Commanders in the bookmaker section, not because of the Commanders. I want to make that clear. It's because of the 49ers. The Broncos are benching Russell Wilson for Jarrett Stidham this week. Jarrett Stidham, the Grim Reaper of backup quarterbacks. Cortland Sutton also did not practice due to a concussion. They're facing the Chargers. Rough defense. Will you go at anybody here with Stidham starting for the Broncos?
I mean, if they lose, they're out, but I don't think they care about that, clearly. I don't really want to invest bankroll into a team that's making decisions like this.
I didn't want to use
And
anybody when it was Russ, and like Russ wasn't perfect, but he's probably better than Stidham, so I'm out.
yeah,
Okay. Tyrod Taylor will start in place of Tommy DeVito this week. Giants are facing the Rams, whose defense is not elite, but, not a great offense for the Giants regardless. But we did see the spread tighten by a point. The total went up 2 points. So does Tyrod Taylor starting impact your view of the Giants here against the Rams?
so he had good EPA numbers on 16 dropbacks last week, but a low success rate, so could be a little bit fluky.
And
Did
he
chuck
had
it?
that earlier this year too, is the same thing where he had some really big plays that weren't what I would call sustainable.
That's the problem with smaller samples. I know that it's going to be easier to get hyped up on someone who at least did that compared to what they had. I think I was going to say the only Giant that I'd be interested in is Saquon, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. Saquon's salary of 7,800 keeps him on the map, especially if we're considering like a 3 running back build in the 7,000 range. I don't know if you have thoughts on Saquon, because I'm going to ask you about someone else within this offense. I don't know if you want to stick with Saquon first, though.
Yeah, I think that this does help Saquon because I do think that Tyrod Taylor is a better player than Tommy DeVito.
Yes.
So like I think it helps him in that regard. And also, like you alluded to, the salaries come down a lot for Saquon. $7,800. If we look at the games he's played without Daniel Jones, whether it be Taylor or DeVito, he's at 91 yards from scrimmage per game. And I care more about the yards here than the carries or targets because like we know they'll be inefficient because this offense is bad. So 91 yards per game, that is nearly identical to Rashad White, who's at 92 yards per game in his full sample. And Saquon has a 57% red zone share. They got to get there for it to matter. So like, that's important to consider. But I would say I cannot tell you the last time I used Saquon on a full, like a main slate. I might get there this week as a result of the salary and with Taylor starting, and especially because I'm going to have Rams on the opposing side. So I'm going to get to Saquon. Who was the other Giant you wanted to ask about?
Do you have any guesses?
Darius Slayton, because he's kind of your guy.
Darren Waller,
Oh, what's his salary? I've not looked at him at all.
59.
No,
So he's
I'd
right in
rather
that.
go Goddard.
We have Goddard and Likely.
Yeah,
Um,
I am unlikely to use Waller. Boo. Okay, fair enough. Nothing. You don't want to sell me on him?
no, I'm not
Okay.
gonna anyway. I know that.
All right, cool.
Because I prefer Likely and Goddard as well, but
Cool. We'll take that. Marquise Brown didn't practice Wednesday due to his heel injury. Even without him last week, it didn't matter. The Cardinals pass catchers did nothing, but they do get a good matchup here against the Eagles this week. We'll talk about the Cardinals in the bookmaker section again, not because of them. Both Joshua Palmer and Keenan Allen this practice Wednesday. They seem likely to sit this week. The Chargers facing the Broncos and Jarrett Stidham. Can we cross them off here?
only thing I'll note is that Gerald Everett has 8 targets in 3 straight games, and his salary is 5,300 for those
Literally
lineups
could
where
not care less.
Okay.
Literally could not care less. So let's dive in now to our bookmaker section for week number 17. Start things off with the most traditional game stack of the week. That is the Dolphins at the Ravens. Right now, the total is 46.5, down a half tick from where it was yesterday. And the spread is the Ravens minus 3.5. Some definite question marks here. Jalen Waddle is banged up. Both defenses are playing well. So what's your view of this game right now from a stacking perspective?
Stacking perspective, I like it, although it is pretty narrow. I think I would say Lamar's QB2 for me. I'd prefer to play Jalen Hurts, but I don't think it's very feasible. So
is he in his own tier above the other guys behind Hurts? Like,
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to play everything as if Lamar's my QB1 just because I need to from a salary standpoint, but I don't want to lose the fact that I do prefer Hurts. But with that in mind, Lamar's got that sub $8,000 salary. Presumably Zay Flowers is good to go, but really nice salary for him at 6,300. And in the event that he can't go, it would ding the offense, but this offense can still move the ball, I think, without him, and that would just probably make Isaiah Likely a virtual lock.
Yeah,
I don't know why they don't involve him in the offense with Mark Andrews there. Like,
Likely?
Yeah.
Oh, he's very involved.
Like, not as much.
Not as much as Andrews, but like
right.
In the 4 games without Andrews, he has a 19% target share, 22% of the deep targets. So he's actually getting like downfield work with a 21% red zone share. So like it's not Andrews, but like we're also not.
No. Yeah. I meant I don't know why they don't involve Isaiah Likely when Mark Andrews is healthy.
Oh, I got you.
I think he's good.
Instead of Nelson Aguilar, although that's rude to me. Nelson Aguilar's played pretty well this year. So sorry, Nelson. I know you're a huge.
All I'm saying is I think Isaiah Likely's good, and I think that if he had to be their number one option for like a game, it would go pretty well. So
yeah,
I love that. On the flip side, though, I think you have to take a long look at Tyreek Hill. Not that he's going to sneak up on anybody,
right?
But the salary of 9,800 makes it a little tricky. It's a tough on paper matchup. Baltimore is the toughest pass defense by yards per target allowed on downfield passes. So passes traveling at least 10 yards, they have the lowest yards per target number allowed. That doesn't necessarily scare me off of Tyreek Hill. He needs like 324 yards to break the record, something like that.
Yeah, he wants 2,000, which is a bit above that too. So
yeah, I don't think he's getting to 2,000, but
well,
I mean, yeah, I mean, but he bounced back with a 14 target game with the ankle. I think that he's going to see a ton of pass volume, which again, it's like it's obvious, but it's also one of those, if you're kind of penciling in Tyreek Hill for like 12 targets in a game that we like, that is very much deserving of attention. And if like Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane are kind of banged up, I don't know what their status is going to be like.
Yeah.
Tyreek can get some creative looks, get some handoffs, that kind of stuff. So he's going to be hard to sort of say, yeah, I'm building my lineups around Tyreek Hill this week, but
yeah,
he might deserve that kind of look at least.
Where do you view him in terms of relative to McCaffrey? Like we said, McCaffrey, we're probably looking 30% or so. How does Hill fit into that outlook?
I think he's about the same, but I might end up with more Tyreek Hill because he's, his salary is 1,200 lower.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be playing Lamar a good amount. And Tyreek, frankly, is the Dolphin that I want the most exposure to. So I'll probably wind up with more Hill. I'm like, just to make it very, very clear, I think Christian McCaffrey is one of the best plays of the year. But the salary, that it takes to get there, I don't know if it's justifiable to, I don't say punt, but there's not enough value as of Thursday morning to just plug in McCaffrey and go from there.
Yeah. I would need like 3 lineups to get to McCaffrey, I think, is where I'm at right now. And I might need 4 to 5 to get to Tyreek just because, like, I don't know. I'm not as enthused about this game as I thought I might be, honestly. I respect the defenses. Haven't had a ton of blowups recently from these guys. on both sides. So I think it could be a bit lower scoring than we want, which is annoying. I will say, though, I do want to talk briefly about the potential for if Raheem Mostert can't go, just because, like, he wanted to get back in that game last week, but they kind of held him out and then didn't practice Wednesday. He hasn't practiced many Wednesdays, but it's always labeled as rest. This time it was actually knee/ankles. I think there's at least a chance. If he can't go, Devon Achane didn't practice Wednesday with his toe injury, but he did that last week too. Limited on Thursday, Friday, and then off the injury report. We get a similar cadence. How do you feel about Achane at $6,900 this week?
I think I just play him a ton.
I agree.
I don't.
If we get one of them without the other, with their salaries coming down, I think that's where you get aggressive. Achane didn't do a whole lot in that game, but he played a lot of snaps. And he's $6,900. We saw McCaffrey have some open holes from a running perspective against the Ravens. So I would be very invested in Achane if that were to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a year ago at this point,
Mm-hmm.
whenever he felt like, oh my, this is the guy. Like, this is the running back this year. I know he's banged up, especially like foot injuries for someone that fast probably can't be ideal. But the salary below 7,000 when we need players in that range, would absolutely love that. If there's no Mostert, but there's also no Isaiah Pacheco,
I would probably go Clyde Edwards-Helaire over Achane, but not by a huge amount. What?
It's just crazy because, like I pointed out, Achane was like, no one can stop this guy. And then there's Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who, I'm sure he's a nice guy, but
he's healthy. That's the main thing, honestly. He's healthy.
It's wild to go CEH over. Like, it makes sense.
Do you agree?
But also, I think I agree. But this though, and I think this is what I'm really getting at. If we get Achane, we get CEH, we get Zeke, we get Zamir White, that's the kind of stuff that's going to let me say, you know what? Let me just get to Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. I
have two value backs with like clear paths that I can play alongside him.
Right. Yeah, I agree with
you. So that's what I think is starting to unlock a little bit in my brain.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Gus Edwards, $6,300. We saw them for their first game with no Keaton Mitchell, and Gus's role, I would say, was underwhelming. They were in a positive script the entire game and played less than half the snaps. 9 carries, 1 target, and the yardage was okay, but it's because he had like this fluke long reception, which I'm not exactly projecting Gus Edwards to have a lot of personally. So I thought it was an underwhelming role. Honestly, even like in the games, if you look at the games where Hill has been fully healthy, but they haven't had Mitchell be like a major factor in the game, Edwards is at 78.5 yards scrimmage per game and a 22.5% red zone share. Like, that's pretty underwhelming. So even with like, in theory, a good role, I don't think I'll get to Gus this week. Will you?
Am I missing something with Justice Hill? No, he's good to go, right? He's not on the injury report. He played 71% of the first half snaps last week, and Edwards was at 34%.
Yeah.
I was intrigued. I know where you're coming from with Gus, but
I said I wasn't going to use him.
But like you mentioned when you were listing off a couple minutes ago, backs down here, you mentioned Gus.
Yeah, because I think people will be interested in him. I'm not really that much, but
are you interested in Justice Hill at 55 instead?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Hill in that same sample I mentioned, where he's healthy and there's no Mitchell, 48.8 yards in scrimmage per game, 13.8% red zone share. So no, he's like Antonio Gibson, basically.
I don't think I'd ever play a Ravens running back until things really change, but I would honestly probably be more likely to play Hill.
Yep. Let's talk about the Ravens pass catchers. Zay Flowers, salary 63, as you alluded to, didn't practice on Wednesday with a foot injury. Still think he'd be good to go, but not totally convinced there. Odell, 58, Rashad Bateman, 53, and then, of course, Isaiah Likely checking in at $6,000. How do you view those guys in the context of the slate? Because to me, both Likely and Flowers are standalone viable plays. I'd use them even when I'm not using Lamar Jackson. How do you feel about them? And then what's your interest level in Odell and Bateman?
Not super high with Odell and Bateman.
I agree.
unless Zay's out, but I'm kind of assuming Zay is going to be good to go.
Same here.
In that case, at salary, Zay might be he's at least a top 3 receiver.
Sure.
I think likely is a top 2 tight end this week once you
Agreed.
consider salary. Can't say a whole lot more than that in terms of like how I feel about them. So
Mhm.
with Lamar being under salaried, now I guess before we kind of move on from this, you mentioned you're not necessarily as high on this game as you thought you would be.
Yeah.
These two teams do play at a slower pace.
Sure.
This is a very important game for the top seed in the conference. This one could be methodical.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily change my view on Flowers and Likely because their salaries are low.
Yeah.
Does it make you like downplay Lamar at all?
I think it more so impacts Tyreek because Lamar is similar to Likely and Zay, where the salary's kind of low. Whereas Tyreek, that's not the case. So it's more so like it decreases the odds I have a bring back, which would feel weird to like have Lamar in a fun game with no bring back. But I think once I think about, because like if Waddle doesn't go, I'm not going to use Cedric Wilson. I'm not using, it's basically Hill or HN or bust. So
I think the best thing that could happen for us in terms of just from a pure DFS standpoint is that Flowers is full.
Yeah.
And Mostert sits, and then you get some lower salaried exposure to this game. I think that helps alleviate some concerns.
I agree with that. Anything else you want to touch on? I guess I would say.
Well, you mentioned Odell and Bateman.
Yeah, Odell. I will. If I wind up being high on Lamar, or high on Lamar, which I will be, I will have a non-zero number of Odell on just because like he can have a spike game as we've seen. Even though his targets have gone down the past 2 games, the snap rate has still been about the same as it was in the game where he went off against the Rams. Overall, in the games without Andrews, 17% target share and 39% of the deep targets. Like, it's fine. I don't know. I wouldn't want to be super high on him. I prefer Zay by a wide margin and Likely by a wide margin, but like if I have enough Lamar lineups, I'll be okay with having Odell tied to 1 or 2 of them.
I won't argue that, but okay. I think we're on the same page.
Okay, let's dig in now and talk about our second game then. That is the 49ers at the Commanders, and the 49ers have a massive implied total in this game because they are 12.5-point favorites taking on the Commanders. Total in this game is 49.5, which is the highest on the slate as of right now. Pretty good injury news, I'd say, for the 49ers on Wednesday because Brock Purdy got into full practice with his left shoulder injury. Trent Williams was limited in practice as well, so he should be good to go. So I want to ask you, in this matchup, they're facing Jacoby Brissett, which could keep the game a bit closer, potentially for longer. How much of a priority are the 49ers at their lofty salaries, and will you run it back with any Commanders in this game?
Well, we already talked a lot about McCaffrey. He's sort of the leadoff point here. I think we're in agreement where, like, there's no debate that he's the best play in a vacuum against this defense in a game that matters for San Francisco, where their quarterback's not maybe 100%. They might want to get Christian McCaffrey a stronger MVP case. I kind of am starting to hope that we just get some running back value cleared up so I can prioritize McCaffrey and like my main lineup. That's how much I like him. But I don't think we need to spend too much more time on him.
Sure.
What else jumps out to me is that Deebo Samuel's salary a bit high. He's got the potential to make us regret not using him. But once again, talking about someone like DJ Moore coming off of like some down games, Brandon Ayuk's salary's down. He's coming off a 113-yard game, but hasn't scored in 3 straight after a 4-game streak with the touchdowns to increase the salary. I'm still high on him.
Yeah.
And you plug him into a matchup this good, I should probably be higher on Ayuk and consider him as like just as good, if not the best play in this range. I love Chris Olave always, just because I feel like his path to dominant target shares and air yards is just clearer than Ayuk, who can be the 4th option on his team. And then we have George Kittle, like him a ton. 6,700 is a bit high, but boy, he looked good on Monday, I was sweating that from a season long standpoint. I know he had like 70 yards, like 71 yards, I think, in the first on the first drive or whatever.
Yeah.
But so not as much after that. But if you think like Purdy's not going to be able to have his full range, maybe we get some more Kittle targets underneath or something, and he's always a threat to run after the catch. So I like all four of them.
Yeah.
Probably lowest on Debo just because the salary is where it is.
Sure.
Where are you with the 49ers?
The same, and I think I want to be aggressive with this team. Part of why I was okay being a bit lower on Ravens Dolphins because I knew that I wanted to jack up this game, specifically on the 49ers side, obviously. But like you look at the games where they've been fully healthy. So omitting the stretch in the middle of the year where Debo is banged up. So weeks 1 and 2, and then since their bye week. Debo's at 86.7 yards from scrimmage per game. Ayuk is at 83.9. And like that's really close. Like now, Debo's red zone share is double Ayuk's if you count the carries that he gets. So that's important. But like Ayuk is really good. He is facing the worst pass defense in football. It's $7,500. He is a prime consideration for my main lineup. The hard question is always, Ayuk or Olave. And Olave at $74, Nico Collins 73. They're all in good matchups, and they're all really good players. And two of them are in pretty efficient passing offenses. But Olave is good despite that. I think I might like Ayuk more than those guys, even with the fact that I love them. So I think Ayuk is like a prime consideration for my main lineup, I would say.
I think that kind of clicked for me just now.
Yeah.
You make a really good point with just the offensive efficiency, the odds that they convert on their implied team total. So long as, Brock Purdy's just there's no setbacks or anything. And the other thing with this team is they have no real incentive to take the foot off the gas.
Yeah.
Like they could have their fourth quarter just hang out on the sideline, but
Sure.
that's only after they put this game on ice because this is a very important game for them. The New York Times playoff simulator gives them about an 80% chance to be the 1 seed right now, but with a win, it goes up to like 92%. This game matters, so I don't think the blowout risk is lessened.
Yeah.
I think Ayuk deserves a lot of attention. I don't know if I can get to Kittle.
Sure.
I don't know if I need to because we have some other
I would
options,
like to at times,
but I would like to.
Yeah.
So he's just another name that it feels probably not going to have the salary to get there. So
I think what I would say is in my main lineup, like if I'm building one lineup, if I can't get to McCaffrey, I want to have Ayuk or Kittle in there instead. I want to make sure I have a 49er in my primary lineup.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
The odds that they have a dud game here are very minimal.
Yeah. So let's talk about the opposing side here. Jacoby Brissett is starting for the Commanders, and not very high salaries for the Commanders, guys. McLaurin is 66, Samuel 57, Jahan Dotson 55, and then Logan Thomas checks in at 51. Any bringbacks for you, or will it be standalone 49ers when you do go their direction?
Will we ever see a world where Terry McLaurin has a salary below 6,500?
No.
Okay. I just feel like
if we haven't seen it yet, we won't see it.
I think it's in a contract somewhere or something. It just never goes down enough. I like Terry McLaurin as a talent. I think the real question then becomes how much of an improvement for this offense is Jacoby Brissett to you? Because you're much more in tune with quarterback play than I am.
I think it's pretty neutral.
Okay.
Like,
because I think that's not necessarily the prevailing perception.
Yeah.
I think people look at what Brissett's done in limited time, in some garbage time,
right,
and just say, boy, this guy's got it.
Yeah.
I don't think it'd be much worse or anything, but like you said, I think it's fairly neutral. Maybe fewer sacks and maybe fewer ruined drives, but this also is not an easy matchup. I think the most likely play for me and potentially the only bring back is Curtis Samuel at a salary of 5,700.
Yeah, buddy.
He's your guy, I know. But he's got some decent some decent overall metrics, good red zone
Mm-hmm.
workload overall. He's not a stranger to a red zone carry here or there, but he's got single game target shares of 27%, 23%, 27%, and 19% over the past
Yeah,
4 games in a game where they're going to have to throw it. Samuel plus McCaffrey helps offset some things too.
it does.
He's the one name that I'm keying in on.
Same. Samuel, even if you look at if you like zoom out and not look at just the past 4 games, if you look at the games where you omit injuries, omit ejections, omit in early leaving, stuff like that, he has a 20% target share this year in those games, trailing just McLaurin at 22.5%. And Samuel has a 33% red zone target share in that time. He had a red zone carry last week because we're back, baby. So I think that makes Samuel pretty attractive 57. He is not in play for a cash game lineup, but if I want to use McCaffrey in tournaments, I am pretty likely to use Samuel as a bring back to help offset that salary. And he's probably my favorite receiver play in the 5,000 range, I think.
I think he has to be, right, by default.
I don't know who else would be the option there. So yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm over Josh Downs. You've never been with Josh Downs. Never been down with
Downs and Dola. Downs and Dola.
Tyler Boyd, Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think is at least on my radar. You like Odell more than I do.
I don't like him more than Samuel, though.
Yeah. It's just a crime that Demarcus Robinson's not down here. But I
know. Like, why is he 64? Also, my guy Rashid Shaheed should be down here too. Let's be realistic with this one.
So yeah, I think Samuel is the name. Plus, again, goes back to the stackability here. Even if you're not getting to McCaffrey to use that, like you use Samuel, it helps you get to like Ayuk or Kittle, like go up from another tight end to Kittle. That's appealing. So I think Samuel deserves some attention.
Yeah. And I also think the fact that all their running backs are banged up does help the viability of those guys as well. Any final thoughts for you on this game?
Think we're all squared away.
All right, let's then talk about our final bookmaker game, which is between the Cardinals and the Eagles right now at FanDuel Sportsbook. The Eagles are 10.5 point favorites. Total in this game is 48, which means the Eagles have the second highest implied total on the slate at 29.25, trailing just the 49ers. Great matchup at home for the Eagles. Kind of need a good get-right game once again. How are you viewing the Eagles, and will you run it back with any Cardinals in this game?
So this is another like important game, even though there's a big spread. The Eagles are playing for seeding, and now the Cardinals are 32nd in adjusted pass defense according to numberFire's metrics. They overtook Washington there.
Congrats.
But Hurts has played only one team worse than 23rd in adjusted pass defense. That was the Commanders twice, and he had 319 yards exactly in each of those games. He had 4 touchdowns in one, 2 touchdowns in the other. I know that this Eagles team is kind of reeling, which is a little bit probably overstated for a team playing good football overall, just kind of losing some games. I think they had a lot of luck in one-score games early on, but Cardinals are 29th in adjusted or in rushing yards over expectation per carry allowed to quarterbacks this year, according to Next Gen Stats. Like everything points to Hurts. We've been asking like, hey, is it a mistake not to prioritize McCaffrey? Is it like a mistake not to just prioritize Jalen Hurts over like Lamar Jackson in a game that could get a little ugly or be a little bit low scoring, or that the clock just keeps moving?
Yeah, I think the salary is high enough where it's like it makes him, that's why it's at least a question. Yeah, I think that's the main deterrent for me, because like we love the tush pushes and it's led to a really high floor this year, but also like he hasn't had a lot of like, if you didn't use him at 92, you're burned kind of games. So I think he's my quarterback 2 behind Lamar right now, but that's also why I'm receptive to considering other guys. Is like I'm okay with Lamar in that game, okay with Hurts, given how high the salary is. I'm like thinking about some Josh Allen pivot lineups against the Patriots, stuff like that. I think Mahomes is in play. I gave some thought to Brock Purdy. I'm not going to lie. Like I think quarterback is a bit open this week is what I would say.
Yeah, I want to make sure I get to some Hurts though.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think it's a fear that I don't get out of my way to get to Hurts. So
yeah, I think that he's worth that. And I think part of the reason why I want to get to Hurts is because I was slacking you yesterday. I was like, this feels like kind of slate, where you get some things right and you have good lineups, but then AJ Brown goes out there and hangs 6 receptions, 120 yards, and 3 touchdowns on you. And I'm like, oh, maybe I should just use AJ Brown then if I'm that afraid of him torching me. If you look at the games they played, with Dallas Goedert healthy, A.J. Brown, a 33% target share. He has a 48% deep target share and 27% inside the red zone. Second half of that game last week against the Giants, he started to get cooking once again. Seemed like the vibes were getting a little bit better. So I think that Brown is pretty fun. And I think as a result of that, I want to be there in like, if you give me one Hurts lineup, I want to tie it to AJ Brown. It does force me to shove in some value plays elsewhere, but I think it's a worthwhile endeavor given the kind of ceiling games he can have.
Yeah, I'm very interested. It's just hard, like you said, to get there. This is not a direct stack, of course, so it's not necessarily fair, and I don't know how the salaries quite line up, but you're more likely to have if you're kind of going like with I'm going out of my way to get upside here. Are you going out of your way to get Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown or Lamar and Tyreek? Because there's the game stack there. It's not. I know it's not a QB two.
Yeah,
2 receiver, but
I guess I'd probably be more likely to go Lamar and Tyreek, but I think they're those 2 stacks are in a similar tier. Yeah, if that makes sense.
They are, and I mean, you don't want to overlook AJ Brown. The reality is, and you make a good point. There's going to be some guys who just have eruption games. It's a big main slate. This is going to happen. There are a lot of players who can have big games. That is another reason to be receptive to lineups without McCaffrey, though.
Yeah,
I know I keep going back and forth, but that's what I'm going to do that all the whole week till Sunday. Just it is what it is. So I think that the combination of what Brown, I mean, all those double-digit targets there. This matchup couldn't be better right now.
Yeah,
I should try to prioritize him. But what other Eagles are you interested in?
So the one downside with Brown is that the Eagles have been a bit more run heavy recently, which they should be, honestly. Like they're pretty effective with it. So like I get it. Yeah. And like that should put me on DeAndre Swift, but his salary is $7,600. He is legally not allowed to score touchdowns. I know he scored last week, but like I think he's been tackled at the 1 more than any player in football this year, if I had to guess. And then Jalen Hurts takes it. Like I think because he doesn't get a lot of passing game like yardage, like he gets some work there, but not like creative, good targets. In order for him to kill you, he probably needs 2 touchdowns. And I think his odds of 2 touchdowns are pretty low, especially at 76. So like he could go for 120 and a touchdown and be good at 76, but he's not going to make me regret not using him. So I think I should be here because of the match, because of the skew towards the run they've had recently. But I don't think I'm going to get there regardless. What about you?
Yeah, it's hard to allocate that much salary to a player who just loses, goal line work or goal to go situations. How many, like aside from the 1 or 2 times that they've done like a sweep or something out of the brotherly shove, what percentage of their like 1 yard to go plays have actually been the brotherly shove?
So I think I saw this stat from Rich Rebar. I believe it was Hurts has outcarried Swift in from 1 or 2 yards outside the goal line, 14-1 this year. I believe that's correct, and I think that was from Reeves. So apologize if that's wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was the stat I saw.
Okay, so basically every time, which it feels like it, and it should be with how high that success rate is. But yeah, I see the case for Swift. I'm just not going to get there personally, especially
Yeah.
with James Cook at the same salary, Rashad White at a
I
similar
prefer
salary.
White. I prefer Barkley. I prefer Cook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Other Eagles are Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. I think that Goddard is a firm priority on this slate at $5,800, given that he's just low salaried exposure to a very good offense. Looking at the games where he has been good to go, Goddard's target share is scrolling, 20%. He has a 27% red zone share as well, equal to AJ Brown there. Devontae Smith, 22% in that time. 29% deep target share, 6% inside the red zone. So between those two guys, I have a firm priority, firm preference for Goddard. What about you, Goddard and Devontae Smith?
yeah, when we talk about Goddard, you want to look at was this 5 straight games without a touchdown as
Yep.
well. I know that this team is like the hardest team to like from a red zone standpoint because Jalen Hurts is a vacuum, but not every play they run is from the 1 yard line or 2 yard line. So, um, and he's got single game target shares of 30% and 25% his past 2 games. He was a little bit limited in his return, but it's
Yeah.
still 15%. Um, really good matchup. So Goddard, no issues. I think I'm gonna have a hard time deciding between Goddard and Likely.
TKO on YouTube said 6 times a charm. I agree. 6 times a charm for Dallas Goddard. I know that's sarcasm, but I think it's funny. I agree. Goddard is a firm priority. Smith is like fine. If you give me 10 Jalen Hurts lineups, I probably got 6 AJ Brown, 3 Devontae Smith, and I've got Goddard intermingled among all those basically, because you want to tie your tight ends to game stacks. Let's talk about the opposing side here in the Cardinals. I think McBride's probably the only guy I really want to use. 68. It is a high salary, but like, again, he's getting a lot of targets. I know he didn't do well last week, but like getting a lot of targets, pretty good matchup against the Eagles with their poor linebacker play. So I think McBride's the one bring back here. Anything different for you?
I agree. He's still the biggest touchdown regression candidate among tight ends. Should have about 3 more than he does. Goddard does have. He's like top 5 as well for the main slate. So just 6 times a charm, but it actually might pan out for
Yeah.
once. But I think it's just McBride, and honestly, at that salary, I don't foresee myself playing him a lot. I'm fine playing the Eagles without any bringbacks if I need to.
I would agree with that. Okay, let's dive in now to our trend section for week number 17. We spent a lot of time in bookmakers. We can kind of buzz on through
Yeah.
the trend section for this week because it's the offenses we're prioritizing. We've already discussed. Let's talk
Yep.
about your first trend, which is the Kansas City Chiefs, because they're in a really good matchup against the Bengals. So they're at least worth touching on. What did you see when you dug into the Chiefs when they've had good matchups this year?
Yeah, easy to kind of overlook the Chiefs, I think, after what they did on Christmas. But playing the Bengals, who are 26th in adjusted pass defense according to numberFire's metrics, the average pass defense that Mahomes has faced this year has been about 18th. If you look at all of his dropbacks, almost a 50% success rate, which is great. Plus 0.06 passing net expected points per dropback, which is numberFire's EPA metric. You would expect that to be 0 if you adjust everything to opponent level. So those are good numbers, especially the passing success rate. But in 5 matchups against teams 24th or worse in adjusted pass defense, Mahomes is averaging just under 20 FanDuel points per game, 280 passing yards, 1.6 touchdowns, 51% passing success rate, plus 30 rushing yards per game. But the Bengals aren't just a bad pass defense. They're just a bad overall defense. They let up big plays. They let up downfield volume. 32nd in average depth of target allowed, just 20th in pressure rate, 29th in completion percentage over expectation allowed, while also not being good against the rush. They've been torched by George Pickens, Jordan Addison, like Michael Pittman. Um, this is a good beatable matchup. And in 5 games against teams outside the top 20 in pressure rate, Mahomes is at almost 23 and a half FanDuel points per game, over 300 yards, 2.4 touchdowns per game. It's possible that he's just becoming a little bit matchup dependent because of how teams play him and how teams with good defenses can scheme against him and just sort of shut things down. Because frankly, he doesn't have a whole lot of help. I like Rashee Rice a lot. Travis Kelce might be a little hurt. He looks a little slower or something. I don't want to project that or anything, but it doesn't seem quite quite like Kelsey of old. But his salary's down to, with Mahomes, his salary's down to 8,000. And again, he's just been a little bit dependent on the matchups. Now, Travis Kelce's salary remains high at 7,800, but Cincinnati's 32nd in yards per route run allowed to tight ends, 30th in target per route rate. So they've effectively funneled targets to the position and been bad at defending them. And Kelsey's averaging over 110 yards in his 4 matchups against teams 24th or worse in adjusted pass defense. Rashee Rice, since his breakout, 28% target share for 10 targets per game. There's nothing else from the pass catchers, but Rashee Rice firmly in that conversation in the 7,000 range, like you said, but also, like you said, maybe some guys with higher upside from a downfield target standpoint. Like Rice's ADOT's not particularly high, doesn't get as much downfield work as you would want because teams just continue to play, the Chiefs in a way that they got to throw it underneath. Mahomes is like screen rate is like 12% this year. It's sad. But what we might get is value at running back here as well. Isaiah Pacheco sustained a concussion in Monday's loss. Jerick McKinnon's on IR. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a 40% snap rate Monday, 4 carries, 3 targets. But he was the guy. He's going to be the guy if there's no Pacheco. The salary of 6,500 is very, very, very appealing. I think CEH without Pacheco is, there's no such thing as a free space, but I think the process is very much there in a matchup this good. I'm not saying Mahomes is my QB1 or even like my top 2 QBs, but I think there's a case to be made that this team needs a win. They're finally facing a defense that can give stuff up and can't really stop them. I'm kind of high on the Chiefs this week, probably higher than most, which is weird to say because it's the Chiefs. Where are you with Kansas City this week?
Really good single entry team because I don't think people will be there, despite a good matchup. So I think they're pretty fun. And like if you use Mahomes with Kelsey, because their salaries are down from where they had been before, you can still get to those mid-range guys. So I think that's pretty interesting for this week. Kelsey has not scored in on the football field in a while. So it's like, it's been a bit for Travis Kelce. I think that's pretty
5
good
games.
78. Yeah. 5 games. I don't mind that. So I would say they're a fun single entry team because a lot of people won't be there. It's a pivot off of CEH. I like CEH. I think he's a great play, like you said. But I also do think it's a spot where you could pivot to the passing game as well. So I want to be on the Chiefs. And then I can get exposure to the Eagles via Goddard if I go with Mahomes and Rashee Rice. I can get exposure to 49ers via Brandon Ayuk. I can still get exposure to the fun offenses while using them. I think that's part of why I think they're attractive.
Yeah, Kelsey, I would not be surprised if he scores twice. He's due for touchdown regression, which usually is not the case for him. He's usually overperforming there. But
right. And you would think like the one thing that would still be there, even if he had lost like some juice, would be the touchdowns because like he's just a big human. But yeah, I agree with you there. It's a fun spot to go at the Chiefs for this week. My first trend is about the Saints and their passing game usage because they're in a must-win game this week against the Bucs, and Michael Thomas confirmed not back this week. So I wanted to dig into their target shares to see what to expect in a plus matchup here. They have only 3 games with Thomas out, where both Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave were healthy, but those guys have gotten good shares in those 3 games. In those games, Olave had 27% overall target share, 35% of the deep work. Rashid Shaheed is at 20% with a 19% deep target share, and then Juwan Johnson, 15% target share with 19% deep, and all 3 guys have a 20% red zone share on a red zone target share on 10 red zone targets. The raw targets for Olave are 9 and 13 in those games. He has averaged 3 deep targets per game. Salary is $7,400. I think that Olave's in play if it's a one-off at 74, but also as a mini stack if you want to pair him with Rashad White or Chris Godwin on the opposing side, or even Mike Evans. Shaheed is not a true value at 62. He does have 9, 5, and 9 targets in those games. I'm receptive to him. It would be only game stacks, and I kind of wish the salary were a bit lower at then 62. Juwan Johnson's salary is 52. That's too close to Goddard for me to go there. He's not totally off the map, but I'm not going to use him myself personally. It is worth touching on Alvin Kamara as well. With Vita Vea back, the Bucs are a tough rushing matchup, but Kamara's salary is down to $7,500. He's at 6.7 targets per game since Jamal Williams returned. He has 34% of the red zone chances in that span as well, which is okay, but not great. So Olave to me is a priority. Kamara, worth digging into. I'll have some Shaheed game stacks here. But how are you viewing the Saints in this matchup with the Bucks?
As usual, I prefer Olave the most. So I went back and watched the tape.
Oh,
Of that first
how bold
matchup.
of you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good on paper matchup, but some people might look. I don't know how much credence people give to first time around matchups, but they'll see 6 targets, 1 catch, 4 yards. He had, let me get this right. I think it was a 38%, a minus 38% completion percentage over expectation for him in that matchup with 148 air yards, but just 4 yards. He got kind of airmailed or underthrown. He looked good. I think if people look at that and say, well, maybe they just played him well, wasn't really the case. And he's at double-digit FanDuel points in 6 straight games. The volume's there. He's good. He's got yardage upside and touchdown equity. That's why I like Olave always. Other than that, I'm just not sold enough on. I don't think I have to play Shaheed. I don't think Kamara has enough for me to want to get there. I think it's just Olave.
And you look at Olave and like you'll see like, oh, he hasn't broken 20 FanDuel points in a while, but it's because the touchdowns have not come in the games where he had yardage. He's had 110 or more yards in 3 games, or 3 of his past 4 games, no touchdowns in any of them. So like if the touchdowns had matched up, you'd be looking at like a 24-point game and stuff like that. So he's got a really good ceiling. We talked about mistake erasers before. Olave does fit that. And at 74, that's pretty attractive. I like him more than Nico Collins, we'll talk about in a second here. We're talking about the Texans. I keep going back and forth between him and Ayuk. I still want to go Ayuk because I like that passing offense so much, but like the fact that I'm considering Olave over Ayuk I think that should tell you how high I am on Olave, just because like I do like Ayuk a lot too.
Yeah, it's just that, again, Olave is the number 1. Ayuk could be the 4th option in this game.
And he could still go for 115 yards because how efficient they are.
Right.
Like he had one something on Monday, even though he was like the 3rd option there behind McCaffrey and Kittle.
I think it was 113 on 7 targets.
He's pretty good. Okay, let's move now to your second trend. Talk about another good offense in the Los Angeles Rams. They are taking on the Giants. And we talked about the Cowboys when they went outdoors to take on the Buffalo Bills, and they didn't play well there. So I think it's worth digging into. You're going to talk about the Rams when they play outdoors, and what they've done is they get set to face the Giants.
Yeah, one thing you do a better job than I do is tracking like indoor teams going outdoors, that kind of stuff. So I want to get better with that. But the Rams outdoors don't have a huge sample, which is to be expected. Just 4 games this season outdoors. And Brett Rippon started one of them, which I don't remember.
It was right before their bye.
Yeah,
Stafford had like a thumb injury, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember that one. So really 3 games to look at in this sample. But Cooper Kupp missed the first 2 of them in weeks 1 and 3. So just keep that in mind. But in these 3 games, again, Kupp missing 2 of them. Stafford had 297.3 yards, 1.3 touchdowns per game, 0.15 passing net expected points per drop back, which is really good. From a over expectation standpoint, he's at a 0.12. Again, you would expect that to be 0 if he just played to the level of the defense. This includes a 294-yard, 3-touchdown game against the top 2 adjusted pass defense in an overtime loss to Baltimore recently. That's fun, and that's enough for me to want to buy into this offense. It's hard to look at this team, at least for me, in terms of like which sample I like, because Kyron's been out, Kupp missed some time, of course. Stafford missing some games, but if you look just most recently and try to get hyper relevant with DeMarcus Robinson playing an elevated role and Tyler Higbee back, is a 2-game sample, but I think there's enough to make me feel like I know what to expect here. Kupp, his salary is 8,000. Puka Nacua is 79. And DeMarcus Robinson 64. They've all run at least 90% of the routes in those games. Kupp's at a 31% target share with Nakua at 30% and Robinson at 14%. In that span, Nakua has 9 downfield targets for a 38% air yard share. Robinson has 6 downfield targets for 28%, which is pretty viable for what should be a value receiver, but he's not. I still think you could do worse than Robinson with his role right now, but I don't think I'll get there at 64. And then Kupp's instead of getting the downfield work, Kupp's getting red zone work. He's got a 50% red zone target share on 7 red zone targets for him over these past 2 games. I like all of them to varying degrees. I think, as you said, Nakua is very fun. I'm going to play Nakua over Kupp just consistently for the downfield work, which is more bankable than red zone work. But in the backfield, Kyren Williams, I think Kyron's still one of the keys to the slate, or a potential key. He just had such a good role. And we want to play McCaffrey because he's got a great role and he's in a good offense and he's really good. But all of those to some degree also apply to Kyren Williams. Since returning in week 13, 23.8 carries, 4 targets per game, 121 scrimmage yards, 83% of the red zone rushes, 48% of the overall red zone plays have gone to Kyren Williams. Salary of 9,400, it's very reasonable. And, the reasons that we're playing McCaffrey, a lot of those apply to Kyren Williams too. So I want to make sure that I'm receptive to Kyren in my main lineup. Again, I viewed him as a consolation last week to McCaffrey. I'm a little bit higher on that in this matchup and in a game that really matters for this team. So what are your thoughts on the Rams? And one thing we haven't talked about is someone like Matthew Stafford. Like, can you consider going away from Lamar, Hurts, Mahomes, Justin Fields if he gets DJ Moore, like Josh Allen? Is anyone like that in consideration for you?
Stafford, no. I used him in that game against the Commanders, but that was more slate specific where there weren't a lot of upside quarterbacks. And I think that's different for this week. So it's a fair question to ask. And I did look at him, gave him some thought, but I don't think I can get there with how many tortures there are on this slate, especially with Mahomes potentially running more. I think that's the key thing that pushes me away from Stafford. But I, as we talked about, adore Puka Nacua this week, and he's part of why I want to, if I could ideally have 2 guys in that 7,000 range at receiver, that'd be great, because I don't want to pick and have just one of Nacua, Olave, Ayuk, etc. So that's another reason why I'm okay not having McCaffrey if I have just one lineup. So Nacua to me is a firm priority and a guy I like a lot this week. I have been a bit too low on Cooper Kupp. I know you'll be shocked to hear that. But he's actually getting a good role. So the sample I looked at was the 3 games with Demarcus Robinson playing a lot of snaps. So slightly different sample because I don't care about Tyler Higbee. I think he's the worst. But in those games, it's a 29% share for Kupp with a 46% red zone share. So that's worth it. I should probably split it more close down the middle between him and Nacua, but I agree with you where it's the downfield stuff's too hard to pass up. So, I think they're both really, really fun this week personally.
I think the case against Kupp at least is that while his red zone share or his red zone target share is good, his overall red zone role is a little tiny bit dampened because they give it to Kyren a lot too. So if you want to talk yourself out of Kupp, that's probably the reason.
Yep. Okay, let's dig in now to my second trend here and talk about the Texans, because CJ Stroud was back at practice Wednesday. Sounds like he'll be able to return this week. And assuming he is cleared, he'll return to face the 25th ranked pass defense by numberFire's metrics. So worth remembering just how good Stroud was before the injury. He is averaging 0.16 passing net expected points per dropback this year. League average tends to be around 0.07. And Stroud ranks 7th among all quarterbacks with at least 100 dropbacks this year. A lot of that did come with a healthy Tank Dell, but in 2 games with Dell either out or hurt early, Stroud is at 0.13 passing and NEP per dropback. That excludes the Jets game where Stroud left early. One of those games is against the Saints, who are a much tougher pass defense than the Titans. So I think the Texans should be able to move the ball pretty efficiently here. That won't get me to Stroud because I think the rushing will be muted or should be muted, kind of protect this guy, maybe. But it could get me to the pass catchers They've had 2 games this year with Dell out and both Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz active. Schultz is a 25% target share in those games. Noah Brown is at 17%. But both Brown and Collins are at 2 deep targets per game in those games. Collins had 80 yards in the first game of that sample, and he's shown, I think it's actually 180 yards. I don't know. I think it's 80. Either way, he's had a lot of yardage upside this year. I'm very okay with Collins at 73. I prefer Olave and I prefer Ayuk. But like, this is part of why I want to be in this range a lot. I like Nico as well. Noah Brown is $6,500. He's similar to Shaheed in that he's a guy to consider in spots, but not a priority. Schultz is 62. I prefer Goddard and likely over him. Not off of Schultz, but I don't expect to get there personally. But with those receivers, DeAndre Hopkins can be a bring back, as we discussed earlier on, as a guy with Will Levis being back. So I might like Hopkins more than any receiver in the 6,000 range. How are you viewing Collins and Brown here? And what's your interest level in Hopkins, whether a standalone play or as a bring back?
Yeah, I always feel a little low on Nico for some reason, probably just because he's not Tank Dell,
Yeah.
which isn't fair to him, but he's really good. I'm struggling a little bit with Noah Brown. It's weird because this is making me high on this offense to a degree, but I still prefer DeAndre Hopkins if I'm playing a one-off in this game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if I need to force a bring back. I feel like CJ Stroud can kind of just spread the ball out in a very efficient way. I'm still considering Brown. I'm still considering Nico, but I wouldn't put them necessarily at such a high place that they are like priorities. Like,
Yeah.
I'm finding an extra 100 to get to Chris Olave.
Yeah.
From Nico.
Let me phrase it this way. We've talked a lot about like secondary considerations in the Chiefs, the Rams, the Saints, and the Texans. Of those offenses that aren't like the big 3 or whatever for this week, which one do you like most? Of the 4 trends we did, which offense are you highest on? Considering salary, considering alternative stuff like that.
Probably the Chiefs because I'm considering the quarterback there.
Yeah.
And potentially 3 plays, depending on what running back situation we get.
Like which of these offenses are you more likely to go out of your way to use? Because I think it's the Chiefs for me too.
Chiefs, then the Rams.
I agree. Well, I guess Nakua is like a one-off, maybe more, but like
I like Kyron a lot. So
true. Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's either Rams and then Chiefs, or Chiefs and then Rams.
Yes,
but I think I will squeeze in some Texans stuff. Like my FOMO lineups might be Texans based, like Nico with a Hopkins bring back kind of thing.
Well, I was going to ask if that meant Stroud for you, which you said probably not. So
no, I think it'd be more so the receivers.
What about a true mid-range? Like, where are you with Noah Brown? I guess let me ask that. Because it's very easy to plug him in a lineup with Hopkins. Yeah. I don't know if I'm that high on that.
I think the question is, would you rather have Godwin or rather have Noah Brown to be a game stack with Hopkins or go Chris Godwin as a non-game stack? Because Godwin is 67 as well.
Godwin.
I'd rank them Hopkins, Godwin, Brown pretty definitively.
Noah Brown or DeMarcus Robinson?
Noah Brown.
Noah Brown or Zay Flowers?
Zay.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
He's in that. Yeah. He's there, but
yeah. Okay. Weather for this weekend, weirdly for December, is not bad. Only one game has wind speeds currently in excess of 10 miles per hour. That is in Chicago for the Bears and the Falcons. 11 miles per hour right now there. Not a huge concern, honestly, but could make it easier to decide between DJ Moore and some of the other wide receivers in that range. Other game at 10 is the Chiefs and Bengals, so check back on the wind speed for that one later. But let's go now into our positional plays for week number 17. Starting off at quarterback, Brandon, who are you turning to on FanDuel this week?
Jalen Hurts. I know he's got a high salary, but this matchup is now the best in football according to numberFire's metrics in terms of adjusted pass defense. You smirking at me?
No.
Okay. They're also really bad against rushing quarterbacks. And if you look at, I mean, I know I said all this already, but like if you look at Hurts, he has not had a lot of easy matchups. Just one opponent, but 2 games against the Commanders in terms of teams 23rd or worse in adjusted pass defense, and he's actually had efficient passing in those games. 319 yards in each, which is just quirky, but that Jalen Hurts. And then 4 touchdowns in one and 2 touchdowns in the other. He's got the rushing potential. Again, this game matters. He can scramble more. It's really easy to be like, yeah, but I can't get there. Could be worth it eventually for an eruption spot whenever the passing and the rushing clicks, which it really hasn't yet. You mentioned that for Olave. It could happen for Hurts eventually here. But the most likely quarterback I'm playing is Lamar Jackson, who's my second love at a salary of 7,900. I'm with you where it's very easy to say that this is the best game of the week. Just play it, like play them, play everybody. It could be a little bit lower scoring if the pace, shakes out that way. If Baltimore can keep running the clock, and Miami, for as fun as they are offensively, they're pretty slow. So that is an issue. But Dolphins also 5th in adjusted pass defense. Matchup itself could be easier. I'm saying I'm loving Lamar, but I'm trying to like sell myself on not loving him, and I don't think I can quite do that. But again, it's slow. It is a tough defense. He has 4 matchups with top 10 adjusted pass defenses this year. 221 yards as a passer, 1.3 touchdowns, but almost 40 rushing yards. 2 touchdowns over those 4 games on the ground. But he's had 22.58 and 28.14 in those 4 games, so he still has some upside, and the salary itself is low. This game matters a ton. I don't think that there's any scenario where Baltimore just takes their foot off the gas. And that I think is ultimately what I keep coming back to is whether they're winning or trailing, Lamar is going to be doing stuff.
And Lamar is a Florida native. So I know it's in Baltimore, but a little homecoming narrative there for Lamar. And that's the only reason I'm going to keep him in my loves is because of the homecoming narrative
It's
for
very
Lamar.
specifically not a homecoming narrative.
Home, like growing up team favorite team narrative. Can we,
was he a Dolphins fan?
Sure. So let's say he was. Let's pretend he was. Can we Photoshop baby Lamar Jackson in like a Dan Marino jersey? I don't know. We'll work on it. Was he alive when Dan Marino was slinging it? I don't know. But I'm going to keep Lamar as one of my loves this week. It's just a low salary for a guy with his juice. The rushing yardage has been very good for Lamar, but hasn't had a rushing touchdown since October 22nd. We're now past Christmas. It's been 2 months. So like rushing touchdown regression is in his future, I would assume. It is a high total. It's a tight spread. I don't want to overthink it with Lamar specifically. I think it's more so talking or lowering me on the Dolphins side of things is where I get to with this game. My second love, I'm going to go Patrick Mahomes because, like, let's say I showed you a blank resume of a guy who ran 10 times for 53 yards last week. He is at home. He is facing a defense that has been really, really bad this year. It's an important game for them because they want to lock up the division. If he checked all those boxes, we'd be pretty high on that player, I think, that blank resume. So I think we want to be high on Patrick Mahomes as a result. Salary is $8,000. I don't think people will be there. So I want to be there. Not like if you give me one lineup, I'm probably going Lamar, but I do think I want to get to some Patrick Mahomes as well. Again, low salary, easy stack candidates, good matchup. I think that is pretty attractive to me.
Yeah, I think I have Lamar at 4.4 rushing touchdowns under expectation, which is wild.
Yeah.
But I think Mahomes is probably the QB3.
Sure.
For a lot of reasons.
I will get to some Josh Allen. Like, I know we haven't talked about him, and I don't want to keep my quarterback pool large, but like, I think the Allen is worth looking at $8,800.
Yeah, but I mean, if your QB pool is Jalen Hurts, Josh
I
Allen,
often use
Patrick
4,
Mahomes,
and like he my QB4. Like, I know you don't do many, but like I'm okay with using 4. That's my max, but like I'll get to a 4th one.
And for just, I know it's a long show, but for anyone who's like, wow, great way to go out on a limb, guys. When you have this many QBs in like upside spots and they put up 30, you're not going to make up a whole lot of ground if like Stafford gets you like 18 or something.
Yeah.
That's what we always are fearful of when it comes to quarterback.
All right, let's go to running back. What you turn into there?
I'm sticking with Kyron. I think I might want to go out of my way to get to Kyron. I mentioned like maybe doing that with Christian McCaffrey, but I think I can just as easily do it with Kyron Williams. They're not eliminated with a loss, yet their odds shift drastically with a win to make the playoffs. So this game matters a ton. Since returning, he's played 61% of the snaps, then 94%, 89, 77, and 79%. Even if you factor in that game where he had a lower snap rate than normal, 22 carries, 4.4 targets for 137 scrimmage yards per game, almost half. He's got 48% of the red zone work. Giants are not a particularly good rush defense, specifically against running backs. I think this whole thing about McCaffrey is very justified, but I think Kyron Williams deserves a lot of attention. He's a lot easier to get to in terms of salary as well. Second love for probably the 17th week in a row, Rachaad White, salary of 7,900. He is gettable, especially with some value, with another value running back plugged in, or Curtis Samuel in particular, or just not necessarily getting up to another tight end who's above 6,000. But 20 carries, 7 target game for 77 yards last week, but 7 red zone carries and 1 red zone target. 79% snap rate on the full season for him. His 68.5% snap rate was the lowest all year last week in a game where the Bucs were up 20-0 at halftime. His role is really good and the salary is reasonable. Third love is I'm going to have Clyde Edwards-Helaire here with the assumption just that Isaiah Pacheco cannot play. I would be receptive to Ezekiel Elliott, though, Zamir White as well. All of your loves are guys I like too, but 40% snap rate last week after Pacheco had already played 56% of the snaps. With Pacheco out in weeks 14 and 15, Edwards-Helaire played 48% and 61% of the snaps, and that was with Jerick McKinnon active. Across these 3 games, while in a timeshare to some degree, CEH has averaged 9.3 carries, 3.7 targets for 72 scrimmage yards, a decent 18% red zone share. I'm high on this offense. That role should get better. He's been with this team for a long time, so he's probably going to get relied on. I think that if there's no Pacheco, CEH is the guy that I will just play 100% of and see what happens from there.
Yeah, I think I'll be on whichever Chiefs back we get here, basically.
Yeah.
And they just don't really have a lot of depth, and that's a good thing in this matchup. My first love is also Rachaad White, a guy you alluded to as your second love. He finally had a down game from a yards perspective last week, but he had 20 carries, 7 targets, like you said, and it's a big game for them. They can lock up a playoff spot, lock up the NFC South here against the Saints, and the Saints ranked 25th against the rush based on numberFire's metrics, so it's a good spot for Rachaad White, and I'll happily go back there once again for $7,900. My second love this week is going to be James Cook, and he's had touchdown issues, and those will not go away. They will stick. Those are sticky. It's going to be bad always. But in the games with Joe Brady as offensive coordinator, Cook is averaging 126.8 yards from scrimmage per game. His red zone share is 23.3%, which is pretty bad for a running back. We would obviously love that to be in the 40s, but it's not zero. Like, it's not as if his touchdown expectation is nothing, and he can turn in long touchdowns as well. So James Cook is at home facing the Patriots, a game the Bills do need to win. And I don't think a lot of people will go there because last week did kind of cool off finally, but the salary came down a bit as well. So James Cook, to me, really fun play. I mentioned Josh Allen as being a guy I want to get to. I'm more likely to get to James Cook just because he's $7,600, good spot for him. And I do think that it lines up well enough to make him a really fun play. My third love will be Devin Singletary once again. He does get CJ Stroud back this week, which should keep the Texans in a better script. Singletary is 89.4 yards from scrimmage per game as the team's lead back, and he's shown single game upside as well. So we talked before about mistake erasers and the viability of those. We don't get a lot of those at running back in this range. And Singletary really isn't that typically, but he has had games where he's had like the building blocks for that. So I think of the value plays, other than CEH is a better play. So I should state that definitively. CEH is a better play. There's no Pacheco. I would say Singletary is number 2, above Zamir White with no Josh Jacobs, above Gus Edwards, obviously. The one guy who would go above him would be Devon Achane if Raheem Mostert can't play. Wide receiver, what you turn into there?
I'm going to pivot from Tyreek, although there's one stat I want to mention for Tyreek in his favor. The Ravens have faced a league high 39 end zone targets to receivers. No other teams has faced at least 33, but they've let up 7 scores on them, which is 18%, and the league average rate is 37%. That's probably a skill, but I think there could be some. I think Tyreek Hill could have a huge game. I'm just going to simplify it and go with Brandon Ayuk, though, because I think that the salary's great. The matchup couldn't be much better. In games with the big 4 active, he's at a 24% target share, 4.6 downfield targets per game, which for me is 10 plus yards downfield, with a third of the end zone targets specifically. I think he's due for some touchdowns, but either way, feel really good about Ayuk, and he's easier to get to than Tyreek, of course. Second love is Chris Olave. Not going to talk me out of him. Nobody is. He's just sort of one of the guys that I love. 13 targets, 123 yards last week, 6 of them at least 10 yards downfield. The Bucs are 30th in yards per route run allowed to receivers. I mentioned that game, that first matchup. Negative 38.2% catch rate over expectation, 148 air yards, but just the 1 catch for 4 yards. Could have been huge. And like you pointed out, he's got the touchdown equity. He's got the yardage, just hasn't put it all together this week. Definitely could in a very, very important game for the Saints. Third love, Zay Flowers. I'm assuming he's good to go. 6,300 is that salary. Back on track last week in terms of targets after a down week in week 15 when he had an 8.7% team target share. Last week, 38.2%. 13 targets for 72 yards and a touchdown. It is a tough sort of overall matchup, but Miami is kind of quietly 28th in catch rate over expectation allowed to receivers. I think the salary within this game is just too hard to pass up.
Yep, I agree. I think that he's one of the better receiver plays relative to salary on the entire slate. My first love at receiver is Puka Nacua. Not a surprise if you've been listening throughout the show for today, because I don't think $7,900 is high enough for a guy this good. He's at a 27% target share in games with Demarcus Robinson's snaps being up. With 27% of the deep targets, he gets some rushing attempts as well, and has lots of yardage upside due to the way he is used. They're facing the Giants, and it's a bad defense. The game could get better with Tyrod Taylor starting as well. So I think a lot of things line up well to make Puka Nacua a really fun play and a guy I want to get to at $7,900. My second love is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to face the Texans, and I'm going to use them as a bring back as well. Hopkins, great options of standalone play too. Will Levis was back at practice this past Wednesday. He's a guy who loves to chuck it deep and often does so to DeAndre Hopkins, but also Ryan Tannehill's efficient enough to be good should he wind up being the starter. Hopkins this year, 28% overall target share, 41% of the deep work, and 38% inside the red zone. It's $6,700 in a dome against a very bad secondary. That's way too good to pass up. So love Hopkins for this week. My third love is going to be Curtis Samuel. Just because of the salary, I got to save somewhere. He has a 33% red zone share in the games everybody fully good to go. He gets carries inside the red zone too. He's shown yardage upside at times, and it helps offset the salary of Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, whoever it may be, and I'll need that for sure. So Samuel, a guy I like in the 5,000 range, which is not super common at wide receiver. Tight end, what you turn into there?
I think there's a clear top 2 this week. Isaiah Likely being one at a salary of 6,000. Miami's been kind of middling against tight ends this year. Since taking over as the full-time tight end, 18% target share, 62 yards and 0.5 touchdowns per game. Kind of low ADOT, but still getting 1.8 downfield targets per game. So kind of a mix of targets. It seems like they have some plays designed to get him the ball, which you always love to see. Second love, then Dallas Goedert at 5,800 against the Cardinals. Again, great matchup against tight ends. Arizona's 29th in ADOT allowed, 20th in yards per route run, and 29th in adjusted fantasy points per target, according to my numbers. 30% target share last week or 2 games ago, and then 25% last week, with also 50% of the team's end zone targets in that 3-week span since his return.
Yeah, I'm going to keep the same two as well. I got Isaiah Likely and Dallas Goedert as my two loves at tight end. Likely a 19% target share in games with no Andrews, 22% deep target share, and 21% inside the red zone. It is low salaried exposure to a fun stack and a good pairing with Lamar, so very high on Isaiah Likely. Dallas Goedert, 20% target share in games where he has been full this year, 27% inside the red zone. He had 71 yards on Monday, and he's shown even more upside than that in other games. So for $5,800, like him a lot. I would probably have Likely as like my default guy for a cash game, but if I need to save 200, very okay going down to Goddard instead. Let's finish up here at defense. What you like there?
I prefer yours. I'm going to once again run my head into a wall with the Panthers.
I did that
at 30,
too.
34. They don't generate a lot of pressure. They don't get a lot of sacks, but Trevor Lawrence has been just okay. I think that I think he can make some mistakes as well. Seems like he's ripe for that, but I prefer yours. I even prefer the Steelers and Broncos as well. If I can get there, maybe if we're trying to still stay in the low salary range.
Yeah, I've got the Falcons as mine. I don't think they should be 3-point underdogs in this game, personally. Their defense has been underrated this entire year. 12th against the pass, 3rd against the rush, and now get to play outdoors as opposed to indoors. Justin Fields is a very fun quarterback, but he will make mistakes. So for $3,600, I like the Falcons. I will use the Panthers as well. And the other ones you mentioned also fine by me. Any final thoughts for you, Brandon, before we close up shop for week number 17?
I think we covered everything we needed to cover. It's extra games on the slate, takes a little bit longer. Also just positional scarcity conversations and a lot of guesswork with some of the injuries. So got to talk through some extra stuff. So thanks everyone for sticking around.
Yeah. Stay tuned to the news as things will change throughout the week. We'll try to, if you have questions for us on Twitter, feel free to hit us up there. We'll try to address how things have changed for us since that time. Speaking of which, Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm on Twitter at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am on Twitter at Jim Sonis. You can find me on Threads at Jim.Sonis. You can find FanDuel Research on Twitter at FanDuel Research. Happy New Year to all you listening. And be safe. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk to you once again next week for a glorious Week 18 main slate. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.